The typical rent-to-rent agreement is 3 to 5 years, okay? All management and maintenance, guaranteed rent, you know, all the usual stuff. But on this video, I'm going to share with you the truth. How long your agreements should be, how long mine are, and how you can position rent-to-rent to maximize the term and maximize your returns. I'm Simon, rent-to-rent specialist, the founder of the Rent-to-Rent Super Conference and the best-selling book Rent-to-Rent 2.0, The Art of Cash Flowing Property You Don't Own. And in this video, I'm going to share with you what I do when I'm negotiating a rent-to-rent contract to maximize the returns and also overcome the objections the landlords may have when they may not be sure. Okay, they may not be sure how long they want the agreement to be. So first things first, you've got to understand this. If the landlord or agent have never worked with you, they might be apprehensive about jumping straight into a long-term agreement with you. That's normal, all right? But the thing is, if you've got your contract correct, there's a way of overcoming that. But the first thing you need to understand is a lot of landlords and agents will say, well, let's start with a year and see how it goes. Now, in many cases, that may not be an issue because if you do a good job, you can extend. But the problem lies when you're investing significant amount of money into the property and then for whatever reason, the landlord changes their mind and you've not recouped to the necessary level to make the deal worth it. So if you are doing a property, it's fully furnished, it's ready to go, sure, I will jump on an initial 1-year contract because it's very low investment for me. If, however, I'm spending 5 grand, 10 grand on a property, I wouldn't touch 1 year with a barge pole because if they decide to terminate after a year, I've not got my money out. So how do you overcome that problem? Well, a great thing to do with somebody that's not 100% confident about working with you is give them a break clause. So you could do a 3-year agreement, but stick a break clause in at the halfway point. So if they're not 100% happy, that they can break the agreement. But here's the thing. You also want to make sure that you've got termination clauses in so that if you're not happy, if it's not working for you, you can give 2 months notice, but also to reassure the landlord that if you don't pay the rent, if you don't look after the property or you commit any other breach in the agreement, they can actually terminate it with immediate effect. So that's how you can appease that landlord. Word of advice. When you speak to a landlord, you should get a flavor and a feel for their long-term plans with the property. And you want to dig into that. So, hi, Mrs. Landlord, what are your long-term plans for the property? Oh, I'm never selling this. You know, I'll be owning this for just donkeys. You know, no intention of selling. If that feels relevant, but then they want to start with a year agreement, then you probably can chill. If, however, you ask that question and they're, well, you know, I'm not too sure yet, you know, I was trying to sell it this time, but it's taken a bit long, you know, I might want to relinquish capital on my retirement. That's when you need to make sure that you're very, very skeptical so that you don't get a landlord trying to exit the agreement early. So what is my typical length of agreement? Well, most of mine are in between 3 and 5 years. The majority are actually 5 years. However, there are loads of landlords that I've started with 3 years and then extended beyond that. Now, here's an interesting thing. I'm 6 years in now. So the majority of my rent-to-rent deals, particularly the early ones, have either come to the end of the initial term or they're coming to the end of the 5 years. And if you were doing rent-to-rent for longer than 5 years, somebody that didn't want to exit or couldn't imagine selling a few years ago now is a little bit older, their situations have changed, they're retiring, they're moving, they need to release capital. So one of the hidden gems about rent to rent that a lot of people don't talk about is I'm essentially building this stock of potential assets that I can buy. And that's actually what I've been doing over the past 3 years. When a rent to rent that I know works, because I've seen it, the landlord's ready to exit, who are they going to ask to help them sell it with first? Well, it's going to be me. So I've been picking them off slowly and building my portfolio, because the ideal aim is one day you want to own as many as possible so that you've got long-term legacy wealth. Because there's nothing worse than having a property for 5 years, it smashes it, and then you end up losing it because you're reliant on that cash flow and you've lost it. Imagine what would happen if you had 20 rent to rents and you're earning 20 grand a month, and then 10 decide to sell and you're not buying, your cash flow goes down to 10 grand. So that's what I recommend. You want to start future proofing it. Now I know what you're thinking, what about lease options? Well, all a lease option is basically when you sign the rent to rent agreement at the beginning, you basically have an option to buy the property anytime within the term. I used to feel like having the lease option conversation at the beginning was overcomplicating things, but sometimes what happens is you do all the work to the property, they get comfortable, and then in 5 years' time, they want to charge you above market because they get gassed up with themselves. So I do think focus on acquiring the rent to rent, but do have a conversation about buying it sooner rather than later, maybe 6 months or 12 months into a 5-year deal. Don't wait till the end, because you will end up paying over the odds. So that is how I approach the length of the agreement with my landlords. For all help with agreements, check out rent2rentagreements.com. I'll post the link below, and I'll see you in the next one.